relationships, as you're stating, are paramount and oftentimes should trump instruction, because guess what the outcome shall be if you deepen those connections, if you foster a family, a safe an environment, starting with good vibes and good energy. The kids will want to raise their hands. The kids will want to participate. The kids will stay back after and be like, yo, Miss G, I got a question about that. So you're talking about like, this is what my thesis statement should look like. But I had a different idea and I really appreciated your example. Yo, like they will connect.
Welcome to the Mindset on Resilience podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Truelove, and I am amazingly excited for the guest that we have today. Listen, we are about to go to depths that we haven't gone to. I've had the pleasure of meeting her at a conference, and such a spitfire, such a dynamic individual. And as you know, we're here to build a more confident, resilient, and mentally strong community. And I know for a fact that she is going to do that for us today. She is an educator from Chicago. She is such an advocate. She's a nonprofit leader of Project 214 and just an overall amazing person. I mean, she does so many different things, a U.S. fellow for the Department of Education. The list of things goes on and on. She travels across the world, speaking to all kind of educator communities. Listen, if I talked about all the accolades that she had, we wouldn't even have time for us to have a show. So without further ado, I am so excited to bring on none other than the most amazing Sofia Gonzalez. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mr. Truelove. Thank you for that introduction. I so appreciate you.
Listen, I appreciate you being on the show. I'm excited for the conversation that we're about to have because we're going to talk about a topic that I feel like it needs to be discussed more than we do, and because we have a lot of initiatives that are in our education space when it comes to mental health, and we focus a lot on students. But what about the adults in the buildings too? And so I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into that, and want to start off first with talking about a little bit of what you do. You're an educator in Chicago as a high school teacher in the English space. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like to start by saying where I began, because that's really going to be like a point of reference for me. And it essentially is just at the intersection of what has now become my North Star. So I started in 2009 in a very gang infested neighborhood within the city of Chicago. I taught at a second chance charter where the kids that we had were either kicked out or dropped out of the Chicago public school system. And so their last chance, to walk down that aisle was with our charter school network. And so our students were aging out at 16, 17, 19, 20, 21 years old. And they were coming in with 2 credits, 3 credits, no credits. And it was predominantly, well, 100% kids of color, and many of them were marginalized, very disenfranchised, very labeled, and just came in just with so many gaps in their learning and just their ability to thrive. And you want to talk about seeing major EDU issues fleshed out in front of you. I mean, as I was mentioning on the panel where both you and I were at in Kansas City, I saw the school to prison pipeline just fleshed out right in front of my eyes, man. Like, I had undercover cops coming into my classroom during period 6 because my students are part of a murder scene the night before. I mean, that's a true story. Some of them I would never even see again. And so just really watching my students just like disappear into thin air to the prison system was just the beginning. Then I started losing my students to gang and to gun violence. And I really just was very proximate to these issues. My students with no registered addresses and single parents with 2, 3 children living in broken down basement apartments. I mean, it was just really, really intense. It was cinematic, episodic, stand and deliver, freedom riders kind of stuff. No teaching practices, no master's degree program, no teacher preparation program would have prepared me, Daniel, for what I was about to experience. And it wasn't till my first student had passed to gang violence that I met his mother in the parking lot. It was the fall of 2012. And I met her in the parking lot and we exchanged words. And I said something, Daniel, that became, man, the thesis statement and the central theme of my life. I said, in the name of your son, my student, I'm going to do something about this. I don't know what, and I don't know with who, and I don't know when, but all I know is that with my heart, my hands, with my classroom, I'm going to do something. And as I was walking to my car, I felt like this summons. I'm like, I got to be more than just a teacher here, man. This is like not just the difference between graduation and failure, but for some of my students, it was the difference between life and death. And so that really set a path. It cut a quick and provocative path on this road to advocacy. I started working with the Chicago Police Department with an organization called Ceasefire, which is a nonprofit that goes into gang territories, locates sectional leaders to call a ceasefire, to call a truce. I was affiliated with them. I was transforming my classroom into peace circles. And rather than teaching, I was conducting peace circles and, giving my students an opportunity to share their lived experiences, to talk about what they went through, because up until that point, for many of them, no adult had really asked what they had gone through and what they had experienced. And I realized early on, like, yes, obviously we are a product of our choices. But even before they got to the school door, there were so many systemic barriers that were like against them, from food deserts to police brutality. I can go on and on to redlining. And, you know, it just became very clear to me. So I did 5 years there. And, well, I did 3 there. And then I went to the South Side. I went to the South Side of Chicago, to an area called Englewood. And if anybody's from Chi-Town, they know that that is another rough area. It was recently considered the murder capital of Chi-Town. And so I was only able to do 3 years where I started, because it just got increasingly dangerous. I was sandwiched between two rival gang territories. So for the sake of my physical safety, I had to leave. But then I went to the South Side and just really immersed in the Black culture and just really seeing, some of the disparities and, some of the barriers and the layers that I was trying to circumnavigate with my students was just another intoxicating journey for me. But it was at that point where my mental health started to dwindle. And I started to experience things like post traumatic stress disorder and vicarious trauma, lots of compassion fatigue. But I still had a love for English and I still had a love for teaching. But as I stated, man, it just became so much more, man. It just became so much more than just a teaching assignment and being a teacher on record. I was on mission. It was personal. As a Latina that's a Mexican Rican bilingual bicultural, a daughter of immigrants, I'm like, yo, it's on like Donkey Kong, because you want to know what? Nope, not here, not today. I'm coming through here. And it has been, Daniel, such a journey. Like my voice shakes just even thinking about the intensity of this experience, of this journey, of this assignment, of this calling. I mean, it's definitely a calling. I feel anointed to do this work. And so now I'm back in my own neighborhood. I'm just outside Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, Chicago born. Now I'm just outside, about 5 minutes west, and I'm in an urban, suburban Title I district where most of my students are from Mexico first gen. So again, super personal to me. And we're still facing very similar issues. But myself and our students, we are resilient, we are overcomers, we are resourceful. We could do a lot with a little, and the party is just getting started.
I love it. I love it. I love the passion that you have, and you can hear it in your voice. And you mentioned that this is a calling for you, and you obviously have had different challenges that you've had to navigate, but here you are, 2024, still standing, still doing the work, and it has to be something that I believe that there's a mission for an individual to stay in not only just the Chicago area where you're at, but stay committed to a certain demographic of students, because let's just keep it real. There may be a easier spaces to teach, let's say safer spaces for you to go and actually do the work that you're doing. But you continue to stay despite, past health challenges, despite compassionate fatigue, like you still continue to do this work. And I just want to applaud you for your resilience and continue to stay committed to the mission that you feel like just brings you to life. And so, with that being said, I do want to kind of highlight some of the things you have shared before we, kind of pivot and go into what we're going to share next. So you have had some, challenging experience where you've lost students, you've been in those second chance programs and, gang violence and things like that have gone on. But I don't think too many times that we hear about the success stories of there's this picture that can be painted, if you allow the narrative to be the case, that Chicago is this and that. What are some of the success stories that you had from your experience working with the second chance program, and even at the school that you worked at after that in Chicago as well?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I have so many. One of the things that I was able to tap into early on is their resilience and our students' ability to be extremely resourceful and to be extremely persistent. Um, and with that, and in that context, that's breeding ground for innovation, for creativity, and for just this ability to withstand odds and pressures that some adults cannot handle. That I saw first on as an instant success. Some of our students have faced very heavy challenges early on in their lives, and they are still present, they are still willing, they are still wanting to pursue their future despite the odds, despite the obstacles. So that first and foremost, our students in high needs, high stakes environments, they have a spark to them, they have an energy to them that a lot of folks in the K through 12 space can be like intimidated by. But if you could really harness in on that energy, it becomes raw talent. It becomes like mountains worth of potential. And if you steer them in a certain way, woo, the outcomes and what these kids can produce are off the charts. Last year, I was a junior AP language and composition teacher, and this is a very difficult class. I mean, obviously, it's at the AP level, and stakes are high, and all the students have to work towards this college board exam that kids all around the United States are taking at the same time, pending on their section or whatever class they have signed up for. And so, very rigorous writing, very arduous process, and it's very, very competitive. So, my student Allison right away stood out to me as this epic and amazing shining star, a recent newcomer from Mexico with her mother and her young sister, a single mom coming to the US, wanting to pursue, you guessed it, that classic American dream and wanting better for her daughter. And Allison jumps right into her learning journey. Didn't know the language when she got here just a few years ago, but hit the ground running, used all her resources, advocated for herself, worked extra hard, worked twice as hard. She gets to my class and she kills it. She kills it. Because she aced my class, but she passes the AP language and composition college board exam, 3 essays, one multiple choice in just under 3 hours. My girl did it, but it doesn't even stop there, Daniel. She then receives a full ride scholarship to Concordia University, Chicago, which is my alum. Listen, I just and let that girl know how proud I was of her, how overwhelmed with joy I was for her success. I went to her graduation this year and I made sure to take my selfie with my rock star. And listen, she is so brilliant if she wants to be the future president of the United States, because currently we have our first woman president of Mexico, then Miss Allison will have my vote. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I love that. And first of all, I just want to take this moment to shout out as well, Allison. I'm proud of you as well. I don't know you personally yet, But I hope someday that I do get an opportunity to meet you and give my congratulations to you in person. But like you said, man, we have all these shining, rising and shining stars. But there's certain things that we can do to help them. And I want to just kind of mention one thing, and I want to get into kind of the challenges that educators face in the buildings as well. But you mentioned like reaching into all of your things that you did know and a lot of things that you did not know in order to even get peace in the room to be able to allow education to take place. And you mentioned something about a peace circle when you were at your previous building. Tell me a little bit about like what was the peace circle, and because I think I know what you're talking about. It's probably some restorative practices. I don't want to say too much, but just in case I'm not saying the right thing. But tell me a little bit about what you were doing with that, and what was the byproduct of it.
Sure. So peace circles are definitely a best practice for restorative justice strategies. And essentially, it sounds like what it is. You get the kids in a round circle so that they have this opportunity to see each other and to break that stale, front of the room teacher and desks in straight rows. And then you have a talking piece. It could be anything. It could be symbolic, or it could be just a regular item in your classroom. And whoever has that item has the mic, has the floor. So also this practice of active listening, and listening not to respond, but listening to understand. So really creating and cultivating a space of mutual understanding, of active listening, because what the kids really struggled with is activating their own sense of empathy and that of compassion, because for many of them, they were stuck in survival mode. So definitely, guards up, walls up. I'm just here to defend, to protect myself. And it became very difficult for them to hear one another because of what many of them have gone through. And so that really just created just such a safe space. I don't do peace circles anymore, Daniel, but I do the mindset of creating safe spaces. And when I travel the country and when I do workshops and seminars and even keynotes to teachers and stakeholders and school leaders, I really amplify that idea of creating a safe space and really amplifying the voices of students, honoring the cultural identities of those who are in front of us as another means of engaging culturally responsive practices.
That's good. That's good. And I think it's an amazing thing. I'm a firm believer that if you're the only person speaking in the room, then nobody else in that room is learning. Like you don't learn from being like inactive in the process of learning. And so I think it's a great practice, and I'm glad that that's something you utilize when you need to utilize it. And I think that's the case with education. You need to have different resources, tools in your bag, and being able to pull them out when it's appropriate. And so, so great for you with that. But I want to move forward and talk about something that is near and dear to your heart because of like some of the space that you taught in. But it's just not that. It's kind of like across the country, teacher trauma. What about the adults in these buildings that are, whether it's Title One school, whether it's urban schools, or just high needs education climates? Talk to me about the educators and some of the things that you feel like need to be discussed.
Yeah, so even as we were discussing offline, I said something to you and I've even tweeted it out. I'm writing blogs on it and I have a manuscript on it. The psychological safety of K 12 educators in high needs, high stakes environments requires way more prioritization. And with that being said, way more resources at the baseline and at the building level. And, you know, we really need to consider, and we really need to remember, and we really need to be mindful of our educators who have signed up for these tough teaching assignments that nobody wants, that everybody's avoiding, and are committed to the success of the students and staff and families therein. And I feel, Daniel, that it is my social and civic responsibility to blow the whistle, to circle back, to do smoke signals, SOS. I don't even know. But through my truth telling and my storytelling and my poetry and my in your face provocative conversations, not only do I want to enter the narrative, but I want to change the narrative. Somebody has to do it. And as I mentioned on the panel that we were both at in Kansas City, the EDIT conference, it really is going to require an all hands on deck collaborative effort. And it is very much connected to our teacher shortage, to our burnout, and to our inability to sustain quality teachers. And what's further, a robust and diverse teacher pipeline. Many teachers of color are experiencing trauma twice as likely, twice as much as their white counterparts, as their more privileged counterparts. And there are so many reasons for that. I'll give you just a few and then I'll let you chime in because I know that this is your jam too. Mental health, trauma. I know you're like, ooh, let me get in. Pero first and foremost, Black and brown educators are still paying what is called the brown tax or the invisible tax. And invisible taxes, to remind folks, is we are paying extra for some of the systemic barriers that we face, and many of us are at the intersection of them. For example, I'm a woman, so I'm already facing some barriers in the workplace as it relates to my male counterparts. And not only am I a woman, I am a woman of color. So I sit at that intersection. So my barriers and my limitations are exacerbated. In addition to that, for Spanish speaking educators, sometimes we are asked to translate without compensation. Sometimes we are given the toughest class rosters because, hey, you black, you brown, you could deal with the kids, right? I mean, and obviously we have a vibe, we have a cultural understanding, we have a mutual struggle that we could join in collectively. But yo, you're gonna throw me in the lion's den with kids that need so much love, so much support, so much structure, and you're gonna give me next to no resources. I ain't down with that. And guess what? That's a problem. That's problematic. Okay. And so just even at the onset of our conversation, this is where the trauma is inflicted, where urban educators, specifically teachers of color that are in these high needs, high stakes environments, are in very toxic situations. It's a toxic, it's a hostile working environment. And it had it not been for our love for the kids, the love for our craft, and for many of us like myself who has said, hey, this is my calling, this is my civic and social responsibility, this is my life's work, I think the shortage would be worse. And so we need to answer to this. And that's why I am pushing at the federal level. I don't know much about policy, Daniel, but Ms. G's going to learn because she needs to get herself to the table. And guess what? I have gotten to the point where if I'm not invited to the table, I am the damn table. I am the damn table. I've got my own folding chair. I'm going to get my behind at this table and we will have a conversation. And is this anger? Maybe. But I feel like it's a mix of anger, passion, and urgency because I'm so close to the issues. Listen, it's a 911 situation. If we want the state of education to change and to transform as we know it, we have got to take care of our educators. Why is this still a radical idea to our nation's decision makers and policy makers? I digress. I pause. I'm passionate about it because our kids deserve better and our nation's educators signing up for these assignments deserve way more than what they're getting.
Yeah, I'm okay with the passion because I feel like the passion that you have um, is coming from a place of not like you say it could be anger, but it's like it's concern. I would say concern is probably a better word that I would say, and empathy, understanding, and just like you said, it's passion for something that that is a challenge and has been a challenge for a while, and we still haven't done anything about the challenge. And I think that too often we kind of fall back on, well, you know what, he can do it or she can do it because they understand. And we understand from a historical standpoint that if we do not reach these kids, we know you mentioned the school to prison pipeline earlier, and so like we have these cultural understandings that we have, and then we're like, dang, like I have to do this, but compensation isn't there, the additional resources aren't there, and it's like, man, like we work magic. Like let's keep it real. Work magic even in those situations at the same conference that you're talking about. Talk about the class I had with like 30 kids, high needs kids, and I'm in there like, man, like how are we going to make this happen? Did we make it work? Yes. Was it a challenge? Yes. But there's something we have to talk about how can we provide more so that it's not a need for this. And one other thing I do want to mention that I think is an issue that is a part of this conversation, but it's not necessarily at the forefront. Like we have this connection to the community, we have a connection to the kids, and we have a love and desire for them to excel. But we also have to not put all the responsibility on a few individuals that look like them and connect with them. Why isn't everybody else in that building able to execute on those same things that we need in order for it not to be all on this person or these group of people? Everybody has to have that love and appreciation as well if they're going to be working in those buildings. That's how I feel. And everybody doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, it starts with education at the building level. Everybody needs to understand that if you're working with a certain student demographic, you have to be culturally relevant. And anyone can start at creating that safe space and honor the lived experiences of those who are in front of you. You don't have to be the same color skin or come from the same cultural background. Just by including an author, a poet, a freedom fighter, and one that's indicative of the students that you serve, that's a starting point. That's free. It doesn't take much muscle power. And those are some of the tasks and the best practices that I'm also pushing at the national level, talking with educators. Listen, our student population is growing more and more diverse. And so we have to create space, we have to celebrate, we have to become privy to ways in which they feel that they can thrive. And in addition to that, all of us should be responsible for undoing some of the harm that has been infringed on some of our nation's kids. And specifically for the Latino community, we're the fastest growing student group in the United States. So if you invest in the Latino community, you are investing in the prosperity of our nation. As just one example of just really looking at diversity from a wider lens and really thinking through how are we going to honor our students and how are we going to get in front of some of these issues that are really causing trauma, not just to the students, but as we've been talking about, to our nation's teachers.
Yeah. But I think, and this is a conversation, and we're not going to get, too deep in the weeds on this, but, I think it comes from what you said. We have to honor, and honor, if you just think about the landscape of honor student, there's like they get a certain star in the in the program. They get called out before. It's literally like putting it on a pedestal. And when you think about like honoring, whether it's the culture, the community, that's something that we have to take into consideration, especially with, some of the things that we hear about that's going on across the nation. And so I think that at the end of the day, like, are we here for the kids? Like, are we here? And you said it earlier when you were talking about learning, like I had to champion their voices, teach them how, to have these peace circles, to see each other. Like, there's a lot of things that you have to do in order for us to get to the space to where we can have the academic achievement, to where we can have the kids that want to show up and actually behave the way that we desire for them, or even the way that's best for them, in their future. Like, there's a lot of work that has to go in. But at the core of that, like, do you value the families, the kids that are in this community, and want to take that journey of learning their present, but also their past in order to propel them to their future? Like, does that matter to you? And like sometimes we realize that it's not the kids in the building, it's the adults that are in the building that are making decisions that lead to things that impact the young people that are in those buildings as well, and it impacts the educators too. So I mean, it's a very much so complex conversation, and But at the end of the day, I feel like it starts like, are we doing the best thing for these kids here? If it's yes, great. If it's no, then we gotta look in the mirror and do something different.
Yeah, and I think, adding on to what you're saying, circling back, I do, man, I do have a concern for the mental health of our teachers. I do have an urgency for the mental well being of our nation's educators, specifically and obviously admitting my bias, our teachers of color. They have a special place in my heart. Every urban educator, has a very special place in my heart. Every Title I educator is close to Ms. G's soul because I understand the price, I understand the cost, and I understand what it requires. And I definitely want to continue to have these conversations to really lift up this idea of where are the resources, the mental health resources for our nation's teachers, specifically those in high needs, high stakes environments. That we have little to no resources. I was telling y'all on the panel, I was visiting my school psychologist when I was losing students, and 1 to 3 social workers at the building level. Technically, those are for the students. And so, where do we go? Just this past school year, I lost a young lady to gun violence, and she was at a block party and she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And just this last Thanksgiving break, and I found out during the school day, and I had to go home that day, Daniel, because obviously I have a history of losing students violently. And because I choose to stay in these contexts, I am faced with similar issues year after year after year. I mean, they had to send me off in a wheelchair. I couldn't even stand. And I came back the next day, and what was only to be put in place was school leadership saying, text me if you need me to cover your class or if you need to go home. I had another school leader reach out to me saying, access your mental health services through your health insurance. And Daniel, that was it. And for me, I really had to be proactive in my own mental health recovery. I still had the rest of the school year to answer to, and I was a wreck. It was a trigger. My PTSD sirens were blaring. I felt unsafe, hyper vigilant. The nightmares came back. Forget it. And I speak very honestly about what happens to me and about what I experience, even physically. And I'm very honest with my students. I had to go back the next day. I shared this on another podcast, and some of my students saw me in the morning but didn't see me in the afternoon. And they're like, Miss G, why did you go home? And I had a decision to make. I'm like, do I tell them that I spiraled out, I bottomed out, I abandoned my car, like I had to be driven home by a staff member, like I was in bed the rest of the day, like, or do I just say, hey, forget it, let's just move on? And I decided, Daniel, to have a classroom meeting. And I said, hey, man, look it, like we all know we lost a student. She was one of mine. You guys know my history. I didn't take it well. And her best friend was in my class at the time, and she walked up and she gave me a hug. And you drop. And I let her talk about a power exchange. Talk about shifting roles. I let my student comfort me, and everybody like they're like, what's happening? And I believe that in those vulnerable moments, both for me, like at a national level and also at a classroom level, like I am unapologetic about this because who's gonna say something? If we are indifferent, if we suppress, if we tuck away, then we are just as much part of the problem. So indifference is not an option for me. And so, these are some of the conversations that I want to continue to have at the federal level with the U.S. Department of Education. You did mention that I'm a school ambassador fellow. And as a fellow with the US DOE, one of the things that we have to do is create a capstone issue for us to investigate. And here's mine. Tell me what you think. It is going to be the intersectionality of teacher trauma, a leaky pipeline, and the bilingual classroom. And I'm going to argue that if we answer to one, we will answer to the other. And I will discuss those gray spaces and interrogate, investigate speak with stakeholders, school leaders at a national level to really try to amplify this conversation and get a hold of some actual tangible resources. Because I'm going back to the classroom, Daniel, for year 16. But can I make it to year 17? I don't know. The DOE, our nation, our stakeholders, our policymakers, somebody better step up. If not, Ms. G's going to continue to circle the nation and make some noise. And as the late John Lewis once said, get into good trouble, necessary trouble. So,
You get into some good trouble. Well, first of all, yes, I think it's a great topic. I'm excited that you're in those rooms to where you get an opportunity to be able to investigate those things. And I want to revert back to what you shared about that power exchange, to where those honest, open, transparent, vulnerable conversations. I feel like those are so needed because educators are wearing masks, and because of that mask, that we feel like we have to put on this facade, like nothing is going on. Like we're the only ones that's holding this weight, this responsibility, these mental challenges that we're facing, and we just got to keep fake it till you make it, and that's not real. And I feel like in order for students to really like see that you're a real person, I feel like moments like that are needed, and there's nothing weak about it. Everything is actually more real and more strong and more strength for you to do that than it is for you to like be someone that you're not and not act like something is real. So I want to applaud you for your vulnerability. And I think in that moment that there was a closeness that was cultivated that would not have happened. There was a certain appreciation and love. Those are things that are needed in order for us to like see each other for who we are. And I feel like those relationships that are built like that, those are bonds that can't be broken. And that's how you really kind of move the needle from a academic standpoint. It's through relationships. And so I applaud you for that. And to every other educator out there that is experiencing those things and feel like you can't, I can't, share this with them. Like, be real, like I was at a conference and I was speaking to this person. She was talking about the lack of employee assistance benefits that educators, teachers don't use them. And I think it was like somewhere, it was like less than 10% of the teachers were utilizing those resources that had in place. And there's a reason why your teachers are not utilizing those mental health benefits. And we need to, like you said, we have to have a conversation. If we are going to say that, this is a real topic, we care about this, and, we always want to do something, after something takes place, we have to be proactive in the way in which we're doing things. You can start by as an administrator, whether you're in the building or if you're in the central office. My mission this year is to have an uptick in our employees utilizing these benefits. I'm going to create conversations and I'm going to create space for us to make sure that this is a priority for us because we care about the adults in the building.
I love that. And you bring a point, circling back super quickly to that moment that I had with my student. You know, it will go down as one of the hallmarks of my career. And I've experienced a lot of success and a lot of accolades and a lot of national recognitions, but it is moments like those, moments of vulnerability, moments of transparency, where we are teaching our students how to be human, and we are teaching our how to circumnavigate trauma. And it starts with authenticity, it starts with honesty. And it really created a moment for all of us that I don't think we're forget. And those are, again, as I speak with teachers and staff members from all around the country, I call those classroom meetings, family conversations. And it's still, I don't know if you're going to be this surprised, but it's still considered a radical idea in many contexts, to deviate from curriculum, to deviate, from that next benchmark that we have to hit as educators. But I argue relationships, as you're stating, are paramount and oftentimes should trump instruction, because guess what the outcome shall be if you deepen those connections, if you foster a family, a safe an environment, starting with good vibes and good energy. The kids will want to raise their hands. The kids will want to participate. The kids will stay back after and be like, yo, Miss G, I got a question about that. So you're talking about like, this is what my thesis statement should look like, but I had a different idea and I really appreciated your example. Yo, like they will connect. And that is something that can also answer to the trauma that we as teachers face. Like those relationships are healing, Daniel. They're healing. And if to create space for that. And one more thing that I wanted to say about, teachers not really using some of their benefits that they have, um, we need to prioritize announcing them and creating access and entry points to them. It was a maze for me to access my mental health benefits. I was on the wait list for a year. And luckily, I have other best practices in place. I meditate, I pray, I write, I journal, I bike ride. I'm a boxing instructor. I take it to the bag because sometimes I want to take it to somebody's face coming at my kids. You bet I will cut you, okay? So for me not to get arrested by the Chicago police, Miss G's in the gym, punching bags and empowering. So thank God I had, best practices in place, for me to finally get into see a therapist to unravel. We're talking 15 years, 15 years of trauma. And some of them are very indicative of soldiers going to war. They don't call it Chirac for nothing. And so these are heavy hitter issues. Like there are times school year, Daniel, I am not well. I am not well. I'm not well, man. I am not okay. And I have committed to sharing that and advocating for myself along the way. And that's what I want for our nation's teachers, for them to say something. Just say something. If you're not okay, it's okay to not be okay. And, those are some of the messages that are just so near and dear to my heart because I care so, so deeply about every student and every teacher.
Well, I want to say I appreciate your you being like very transparent, and I won't even say transparent, vulnerable, because I feel like there's a difference between transparency. You can tell the truth and it's transparent, but it's not like it doesn't have depth to it. You're being vulnerable in this moment because not everybody is willing to admit that there are times where they're not okay because somebody can take that and run with it and build whatever type of narrative that they want. But the only narrative that we're okay with right now is that you're sharing your truth and we appreciate it. We value you. You're an amazing person. You're an amazing educator. Everything about you, I love it. And so I want to make sure that we continue to build up educators that are in those spaces and have those real moments because it is real. But I think this right here creates space for other individuals that may not be well as either, for them to be able to speak out to and be able to get the help that they need versus just continuing to carry this on. And so I have one last thing I want to ask you, and that is like to all the educators out there that may have experienced trauma in the past or may not be well, or this summer they're not really doing anything to focus on them. They're just like, what, I'm going, I'm taking time for me, but I'm not really being proactive in dealing with some of these past traumas. Like, what would you share with them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I just mentioned, self advocacy is top tier. Self advocacy is top tier self care, hands down, full stop, period. You know, oftentimes teachers do feel heavily misunderstood. I mean, we feel underappreciated, underacknowledged, and definitely underpaid. And the last thing that we want to do is to continue to fight through a system that for many of us was not designed to see us thrive. So I get it. I get the lethargy and I get the sadness, and I get that disconnect. But what I will say is, first and foremost, is to advocate for yourself and to really demand those resources that you deserve. And secondly, is to connect yourself with community. Community is powerful, whether it be your friends, whether it be your family, just surrounding yourself with those that love you, that see you, that honor you. For me, my jam are fellowship and affinity spaces. I love me some affinity spaces because, as you can see, I'm a lot. And I need like an entire community and network to like hold space for me and to like uplift me and to affirm me and to harness, all this energy and this passion that I have for the work. And so advocate, communicate, engage in community, and ultimately fill back up your soul, your love tank, do things that bring peace, that bring healing, that bring joy, sitting in front of a body of water or going for a long walk. We feel oftentimes that to take care of ourselves is selfish, but it is so the contrary. As leaders and as servants, public servants, all we do is care and tend to the needs of others. And it is actually a very selfless act to pour back into oneself. So, those are some things that are top. Show yourself some love, give love back to yourself, flow it back.
Come on, come on. I love it. And so we're going to end right here. And it's been such a powerful conversation. I just want to say thank you so much for being a guest. I love the passion, I love the energy, but that just lets us know that this is something that you care about. And so the last question that we have on our episode, we ended with better days ahead. And so for all those individuals that you've advocated for, what encouragement, whether it's a quote, whether it's a mantra, or whether it's just some advice like you've shared right then, but you got any advice for those to encourage us that there are better days ahead?
Yes. I do have this tagline that I say in that I want to be like glue wherever I go, and that is every revolution begins on the heels of resistance. you know, Man, to be a part of the revolution, to be a part of the solution, it starts with resistance, right? Resistance of injustice, resistance of inequities, resistance of things that we know at the core of our being is just not right. And being part of that solution, I just want to encourage every change maker, every agent of change, every activist, every thought leader that is in the space, that is listening, and that will listen to be part of that revolution, to continue to resist. To every student and teacher under the sound of my voice, I love you. I see you. Keep on keeping on. And every day is a new opportunity to release, to let go, and to embrace a whole new set of possibilities. Every revolution heals of resistance, and that is my life's mantra.
Wow, love it, love it. And I appreciate you. So we end with the advice that we get from our guests. Remember, to all of you all out there, revolution begins on the heels of resistance. So we thank you so much for joining us. This is another episode of the Mindset on Resilience podcast. We're out. Until next time.